all due love and respect, defining that kind of phenomenon is mainly an academic exercise. As far as I'm concerned, I am dealing with the practical consequences of it. So I don't care too much for the definition, because real life is running against all definitions, and nevertheless, this is what counts. So let me say only one word. I'm not going to define it, but of course, the phenomenon of anti-Americanism, the same, by the way, with anti-Semitism, shows up in different attires, different costumes, different masquerades at different times. So the anti-Semitism of today shows up in the ugly disguise of anti-Zionism, but it's basically the same. The individual Jew has been replaced by the Jewish collective in the Middle East. And the anti-Americanism of today has, of course, a different appearance compared to the time of Mr. Lenau and others. I tell you one example of this kind of benign anti-Americanism. 3 or 4 days after 9/11, Günter Grass published a long article in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, which is one of the better papers in Germany, asking the basic question, was haben wir ihnen angetan, dass sie uns so hassen? What have we done to them that they hate us so much? And this was, of course, a kind of built-in justification of the terrorist attacks, because he was shifting the responsibility from the people who performed the attacks to the people who suffered from the attacks. And to my understanding, this is anti-human, anti-rational, and anti-Americanism. It's blaming the victim for what is done to the victim by some perpetrators who are declared innocent because they had to do so. This may not be a very academic definition, but I think it complies with the reality.
In answer to the question of what anti-Americanism is, here's a nice answer. The cover of a magazine published in Norway by the newspaper Aftenposten, which is supposed to be the newspaper of record in Norway. And here's a nice headline, "Hvit nok for USA." Now, he's about to win an election, so I guess he's hvit nok. But why is he white enough? Is he white enough for the United States? He's not white enough for Norway. But that they're not going to talk about. But
he wouldn't be white enough for the progressive leftists in Berlin.
But this is their angle. This is what they put on the cover of a magazine that's sitting on the newsstands for a month, on the verge of this election. I mean, that's anti-Americanism. It's ridiculous. America is about to elect a black president, and it's still this European stuff about racism. I mean, it's ridiculous.
And let me add something to it. When Obama is being elected, and I think he is going to be elected, and it's highly likely that he can't stand up to all his commitments, because he will have to compromise with reality. It will not be going the clear outcome of realpolitik, but his enemies will be blamed for his failure. So the set is already there. And the German public is now divided into 2 segments. One segment says he is not going to be elected because they will kill him. A big part of the German public goes that way. And the other part says he will be elected, but they will make it impossible for him to rule the way he would like to rule. So in any case, the Americans are being blamed. They have no chance. And this is resentment. This is resentment. You are being this kind of deep contempt for what you are, not for what you do. You have no choice. They give you no option.
As I said in my introduction, anti-Americanism for me is criticizing the United States for what it is. And quite frankly, that's exactly what the McCain campaign is doing with Obama. They're criticizing him for what he is. He's just as much an American as John McCain. It shouldn't even be an issue. It was interesting that Colin Powell, in his endorsement of McCain, one clip that wasn't really widely played on the Danish media at any rate, He was saying there have been all of these rumors, also when you last called him Barack Hussein Obama, these rumors that Obama is Muslim. And as Colin Powell quite rightly said, so what if he is? Does it really matter? He goes, accusing him, having that as an accusation, he goes, that's not America. And America is much more than, quite frankly, what conservatives within the Republican Party think it is. And therefore, I think if we're looking at anti-Americanism, I think the idea to equate anti-Americanism with, for example, and this was done very often in 2003, with opposition to Bush administration policies, is patently ridiculous. So again, if you're anti-American, you don't like anything about the United States. You don't like its popular culture, you don't like its political system, you don't like anything about it. But the people that can be called rightfully anti-American are a very small group, I think. Now, pardon? Yeah. I take your point though, Bruce, about, I get asked regularly too, is the United States ready for a black president? I think, and I always answer, yes, of course the United States is ready for a black president. Also because the United States, in its racial relations, has advanced so far. What you see often in Europe is more like what you could call a lag between, and there I think the generation, my generation, from '68 as it's called in Denmark, does bear some responsibility for that. Because there is this widespread attitude that the United States is a racist country. And it ignores the advances that have been made in the United States. Just to give you one small example, and then I'll stop. It was interesting that yesterday I was watching a program, a Danish program, late in the evening, a news program called Deadline. Most of you know it. And then all of a sudden there was breaking news, and it said, well, 2 white supremacists have been arrested because there was this plot against Bush and everything. And then I thought, Obama rather. And then I thought, my goodness, and then I switched over to CNN and there was nothing there, and I was looking at the American newspapers today, and of course it was mentioned, but it was like, it was almost a big deal here, and I think it says more about Danish attitudes towards American race relations than it does about the reality of American race.
Kind of wishful thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it confirms in the Danish minds that yes, there they are.
They were covering that on the, I was watching.
Well, I think I saw Bruce jumping to the microphone, so I'll give you a comment and then we'll open for discussion.
I was just going to say that I was watching the French news at the hotel just before I came here. They were covering that story as well. That's all.
It was one of the main stories on German news broadcast yesterday.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I just want, you really not think it would be any kind of a problem if, I don't think he is, but if Barack Obama were a real believing Muslim? You don't think that would be a problem?
I'm not saying it wouldn't be a problem for some people in the United States.
No, I mean, you don't think it would be a problem and any kind of a challenge?
It wouldn't be a problem for me.
No, I mean, you don't think it would represent any, I mean, does it bother you that certain people in the American government are very, very extreme Christians? Okay, but does it bother you that some people are very extreme Muslims?
Yeah, I don't like extremism in any religion.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, who wants to ask a question or say something? Yeah, send forth. We have to keep it very brief.
Yeah, very brief. I have actually to offer a definition of anti-Americanism, and that is different standards. So you find always a standard where you can measure the states in an unfavorable way, and you always find a standard where you can measure any other than the US in a positive way. So that's one definition. And then a comment to
Carl Peterson.
To Carl, if Obama is a Muslim, it doesn't really matter, I would say, a priori. But it is a problem if he hides it. and that I think is something which.
But he's
is,
not hiding it. He's a Christian.
or if he has been a Muslim. And maybe that goes back to missing birth certificate. I don't know.
Well, I think these kinds of. I mean, it's neither here or there. At the end of the day, who cares what religion he is? As I say, I certainly don't. And Colin Powell doesn't, by the way.
Right. Yes. First you.
I was just wondering, if Obama really gets elected, there will be briefly in Europe happiness just to get rid of Bush. Same happiness and pro-Americanism that we were experiencing shortly after 9/11. But being a black president,
24 hours.
yeah, like 24 hours, something like that. But being a black president, being the European racism and compared with the American racism, don't you think that actually by electing a black president, it could eventually turn into even more anti-Americanism in Europe?
Who are you asking? Who do you want? Well, we need one answer.
Bruce.
Well, I don't. Okay, but what do you mean? I'm not sure I get the.
You've described in your book the race politics that we are experiencing in Europe, and that we are actually, when it comes down to that, we're not a multi-ethnic society like America is. We're actually very much trying to protect our nationalities. And our the way that we treat races here in Europe could actually lead maybe to more anti-Americanism.
Right, that's your point. So,
Well, for some reason I'm just like.
May I try to answer?
Go ahead.
I think that anti-Americanism has not to be fueled by it being used one way or another to justify my and your resentments without relating to real facts in America. And I have another suspicion, I want to add it now. Look, there was a kind of Obamania in Germany. And I, for myself, I like the guy for mainly one reason. His wife is very attractive. I do have highly objective standards of judgment. Yes. No, but listen, what I suspect, and I think I may be not totally wrong, many Germans who are heavily biased against America now are heavily pro-Obama. Because by being pro-Obama, they can prove to themselves that they are not anti-American. And the guy is black, and he is coming from the lower class. Nevertheless, he is well educated. So Obama is a tool. He is being used to prove that the anti-Americans in Germany, and it's all over Europe the same, can prove to themselves they are not anti-America. And of course, this is due to fail. After the first disappointment, this will totally collapse.
okay, thank you. Kenneth?
Yes. My question is primarily for Carl. It seems that in your viewpoint, following your viewpoint, patriotism more or less comes down to a question of whether one is liberal or conservative American. No. And that the patriotism, that it's only the conservative people in the US who are criticizing the liberals for being unpatriotic. In my daily work, I come across a lot of young people who come to my office. I work as a special consultant at the Danish People's Party press office, and I actually have to defend core Western values like freedom of expression. I have to defend the equality of the sexes, because these young people actually don't see the point of it. They find it more important to express respect for their pupils, their common pupils, who are Muslims. That I find actually quite strange. And I find that what you're actually seeing in Europe and among some people in the US is kind of a self-loathing. a self-loathing of Western values. And I want to ask you, Carl, I don't know if you're familiar with the book by David Horowitz called The Professors. One of the professors who are in this book is Ward Churchill, who has compared victims of 9/11 with the wars in the gas chambers in Germany. Don't you think that is quite an unpatriotic act of this guy, that he can make such a terrible comparison?
Oh yeah, I think it's a ridiculous comparison. But if you're asking me my definition of patriotism, I think it's a real problem that especially conservatives within the Republican Party impugn the patriotism of their political opponents. I would never I openly disagree with McCain's policies, both foreign and domestic. I don't agree with them at all. I think he'd make a horrible president. I would never, ever impugn his patriotism. And US patriotism is markedly different from the kind of patriotism I think you find in Europe. And I think it's one of its advantages. It's often referred to as being minimalistic. You believe in certain ideas. And if you believe in these ideas, you can call yourself a patriotic American. And there's no incompatibility between having national pride and also celebrating cultural diversity. It's also sometimes called soft multiculturalism. Multiculturalism, also in Bruce's book, I think receives quite a lot of criticism. It's sort of like Europe is giving up, secular Europe is giving up on its core values as you describe them, and therefore, again, the Muslims will take over. I think that kind of discourse is, quite frankly, extremely debilitating. I support more a kind of patriotism that, again, makes it compatible to have cultural diversity and tolerance for others' beliefs and so on, but still adhere to American values like freedom and democracy.
Thank you.
How are you supposed to respect beliefs if those beliefs include the belief that you yourself should be killed?
But that's, again, Bruce, I think that what I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I see in your work, what I see, quite frankly, in the Danish People's Party's rhetoric, is this idea that of a sort of one Islam. And Islam is many things, as I understand it. There are also moderate Muslims in the world.
Please, let's not have that discussion today.
Okay, well, I'm sorry Bruce brought it up. So
this is not a discussion on Islam. Let's go back to the main theme, anti-Americanism. And yes, there's a gentleman down there.
First of all, Carl, I want to just thank you for presenting a dissenting point of view. I may not agree with you, but four panelists in complete agreement would just be slightly boring.
That's true.
That's one question. Since we're at the Tryckfrihetsskapet, I would like to ask, what do you perceive, if any, to be any risks inherent towards free speech in the US if Obama were elected? I'm thinking that he might be trying to enact hate speech laws and label legitimate criticism as hatred, akin to the kind of laws we have in certain European countries, which are kind of debilitating. The question goes to any one of you.
And if I may add something to that, there's been a lot of discussion on how can you silence the voices of talk radio and the internet. There's the so-called fairness principle, where some office in Washington will sit and monitor what people say on the radio and introduce fairness principle. There are some people, I will not include myself in that, There are some people who think that perhaps an Obama presidency is the end of free speech, or the beginning of the end of free speech.
Man, it's astounding. You know what? I would recommend read Obama's speech on race that he gave in March this year. One of his, I think, most stellar characteristics is that he tends to look at both sides of an argument. He places himself in the position of his opponent. That speech was absolutely remarkable. The very idea that free speech would end in an Obama administration is quite frankly, I find it beyond the pale. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think both left and right are in danger of making Obama more than he is, almost distributing superhuman qualities to him. And whereas the left sees him almost as the second coming of Christ, the right also is almost making him the appearance of the Antichrist. And I think there's a real danger. He is an ordinary politician born of a fairly ordinary political machine in Chicago and shaped by that.
It's not an ordinary machine.
Well, it's fairly ordinary compared with a number of places. Okay, I take your point. But I come back to he's an ordinary politician who's made his career out of doing deals and doing some very, very good deals. And he's also had a fair bit of luck. Now, that having been said, he is going to face exactly the same checks and balances as any other president or any other politician. The joy of the American system is there are so many checks and balances. All those members of the House of Representatives, they're going to be up for election in just 2 years' time. We don't have to hang around 4 or 5 years like in Europe, 2 years' time. There is check after check after check. I do not see any realistic possibility whatsoever that the fairness doctrine will be re-established or anything of that sort. It's going to be, what's going to be remarkable about US policy, both domestic policy and foreign policy, is actually not so much the change, but sadly for many progressives, the continuity.
Thanks and gifts.
Americans and all the others